Do you ever wonder what's beyond our dimension? What strange creatures lie behind our field of view? Could we comprehend it? Do we even want to know the real answer?
Well, if it's these guys on the other side of our dimension, I'd rather keep the door shut.
Pinhead, the lead Cenobite of Leviathan's army.
And the Tall Man, Lord of the Dead.
For this match, we'll be compositing Pinhead with everything from the Hellraiser movies, the original novels, the comics, and even Dead by Daylight. And the Tall Man will have feats from the Phantasm movies, as well as obscure advertisements.
I wonder what that will give him. Also, Pinhead will not be receiving his amped-up deity powers, nor will he be receiving Lucifer's armor, as those were both non-standard powers for him that were very situational for him to get in the first place. He has plenty enough on his own anyways.
Let's see which of these supernatural slashers will have a new recruit in their army by the end of this.
Every demon and Cenobite in hell knows to pray to only one god. The god of flesh, hunger, and desire.
Leviathan, Lord of the Labyrinth.
This giant floating rhombus in the sky feeds off the fear and suffering of the people on Earth. But in order to create that kind of suffering, Leviathan needed loyal servants who would carry out his will. Cenobites!
Explorers in the further regions of experience. Demons to some, angels to others.
It's a Cenobite's job to make sure people fear, or help people find the sweet spot in between pain and pleasure. The Cenobite's motives are inconsistent. But for certain, we know that Leviathan needed a lead Cenobite to control them all, and that's why he has Pinhead.
But who was Pinhead before becoming this harbinger of pain and pleasure? Well, he was simply Elliot Spencer, a compassionate British man born in the Victorian era, who served as a captain in World War I. He used to feel great empathy for his fallen comrades, but as the war raged on, the horrors of war broke him.
Elliot lost faith in not only humanity, but God as well, for failing mankind. When the war was over, Elliot suffered from PTSD and had lost the will to live. So, he partook in a hedonistic lifestyle, roaming the earth in search of pleasures that would make him feel something again. That's when he found the Lament configuration, and came to know the true pleasures of pain and suffering.
Now a Cenobite, Pinhead joined a gash. Fucking gross-ass name. He joined a gash that consisted of the Chatterer, Butterball, and female Cenobite, otherwise known as Deep Throat.
You probably didn't get that name for nothing. Let me see that box.
I wouldn't touch that box if I were you. Ignoring the likely torture from the Cenobites you'd receive, it actually acts as a pretty deadly weapon on its own. It can grow spikes to harm anyone who's holding it, and even shoot out chains to impale people with.
You'll find out very quickly that Cenobites like chains very much. That is, in fact, Pinhead's main method of attack. Thanks to his newfound hellish abilities, Pinhead can summon hundreds of chains, which he uses to cut, impale, and otherwise maim his victims.
He can use these chains to clear groups of people with ease, or restrain others if he doesn't want them moving. Some of them have extra blades that can help to fully decapitate someone. Maybe we should have put a content warning before this episode. Anyways, others can produce electric shocks potent enough to blow someone up. And he can summon these chains from anywhere thanks to these small portals he creates.
You're too chipper about this. I don't like it. But the reason he's able to fling these chains around so easily is thanks to his telekinetic abilities. He can use them for more than just chains, though. He throws CDs at people, impales them with pool sticks, and he was able to bust open a fire hydrant.
Yeah, his telekinetic abilities are actually pretty strong. He can even make an entire room shake just by arriving. With a combination of his chains and telekinesis, we've seen him lift grown men and cars, bust through wooden doors, and crash through concrete and stone walls. And other Cenobites can smash through concrete walls on their own, and the lead Cenobite himself should likely scale in some form.
It is made very clear that Cenobites are far stronger than us mere mortals. Bullets don't do jack shit to them, and neither do lasers. So I don't know why Pinhead bothers catching bullets in his mouth. Good speed feat, though. But more into survivability, he got an axe to the head and was ultimately alright. And there was that time he endured being near a gas tank explosion. But in hell, Pinhead's power becomes even greater.
There, he can endure being impaled and even having his heart ripped out. And from here, the abilities of a Cenobite just become stranger and stranger.
Let's see. Pinhead can disguise himself as a loved one to trick people before hurting them. And that pairs with his ability to mimic anyone's voice, even some guy's son.
I hate that.
He can use heat powers to melt a cross onto a guy's hand for kicks, and as an inverse of this, he can turn water into an icicle to stab people with. He's mastering the elements. Though it seems he prefers the cold because he can also create a room in hell that's cold enough to freeze people to the point that they're brittle and easy to break.
He can create explosions, because why the hell not? He can walk on water, heal allies by reversing their wounds, mess with electronics, and even use transmutation to turn a man into a painting. This ability may also explain how he was able to turn the lament configuration into a diamond to prevent it from being used against him.
I'm not done proving Pinhead's the Avatar yet. He has earthbending too. Look at how he moves the walls around, and creates passages in the road. He can also strangely make a van grow larger on the inside. Maybe even stranger than this is his ability to just give people horrible diseases. Not through sex though, it's just another ability of his.
It's also important to note just how much control Pinhead has over someone's mind. A Cenobite is able to remove someone's memory orb to give them amnesia, and they can also force someone to go through sensory overload, heightening someone's senses to the point of hallucination. He can also give someone empathy overload, having them feel the pain of those around them, and any future pain that they may feel.
You've probably guessed by now that Pinhead is no longer the compassionate man from before. I mean, if you're gonna be the right-hand man to basically Satan, I guess you gotta throw your morals down the tube.
And yet, despite his sadistic desires, Pinhead still held on to that compassionate man he once was. Though his memories had been erased, Elliot Spencer still lived on, and was the only thing keeping Pinhead somewhat neutral. That was until Kirsty Cotton, who had escaped Pinhead before, reminded him of his past, an action that Pinhead genuinely respected. Enough so that, when a new Cenobite arrived to kill her, Pinhead stepped in and risked his life for her.
You may think this killed Pinhead, but don't be so silly. Instead, Pinhead was split into two halves because of this. Elliot was banished to Limbo, while Pinhead was trapped inside a Pillar of Souls. I don't know. Reminds me of Superman 3. Eventually, the more evil Pinhead broke free and began to wreak havoc now that his human side was gone.
During this mayhem, he started to make his own Cenobites out of the people he killed. This includes the likes of Barbie, who shoots fire from his mouth, Camera Head, who speaks only in TV puns,
That's a wrap.
CD Head, who throws CDs at people, Dreamer, whose only notable quality is that she can give you cigarette burns. Okay. And of course, Piston Head. This is a pale imitation of Pinhead's original gash.
Luckily, Elliot was able to merge back with Pinhead and go back to being only kind of evil. Though eventually, just being simple old Pinhead was starting to bore him. Despite already having a ton of weird powers, he wanted more. So he went on a quest to start killing magicians and stealing their knowledge and relics, until he could become a master magician himself.
And boy did he learn a lot! Now he can magically make you pregnant!
What?
And when the baby is born, it'll age rapidly, becoming an adult in 12 hours.
I don't know why I was expecting normal magic from this franchise.
It's really on you at this point. He can bring origami to life, which will suck the blood out of people. He can turn his own blood into acid if he feels like it, and he can make you go blind.
He's able to create an evil fog that will mutate anyone who's caught inside by giving them extra limbs or duplicating any previous wounds. He can also create magical defenses around himself, which is the first normal power I've heard today.
He can also start absorbing what little life force remains from dead creatures in order to heal himself. And now, he doesn't have to wait for someone to open the box in order for him to arrive on Earth. He can just create portals on his own.
That does luckily remove Pinhead's previous weakness with the box, but there are still some vulnerabilities to this Cenobite that can be exploited. I mean, first of all, while those pins in his head are iconic, and good for stabbing people in the neck, once you knock them all out of him, he loses all of his powers.
Also, remember when Kirsty reminded him of his past? Well, doing such a thing actually results in him being spiritually weakened, which is why the Doctor was able to defeat him so easily back there.
Yes, and while that did result in Pinhead being strangely split in two, his other Cenobites were killed permanently after this, proving that despite their great power, Cenobites are still capable of dying.
But above everything else, Pinhead is way too arrogant for his own good, and often overestimates his power and capabilities. He tortured an angel, despite being told beforehand that he would be punished by God for doing so. Sure enough, Pinhead was immediately stripped of his rank and forced to be human again.
Another time, Pinhead thought he could become more powerful than Leviathan by quitting the Cenobite business and tricking some people into letting him merge with a new godlike entity. This, again, went horribly, and Pinhead ended up in a worse situation than he started in.
But Pinhead's biggest mistake was in the Scarlet Gospels, where he believed he should rule over hell himself, and so he took Lucifer's armor and tried to rule the place. Only for Lucifer to immediately wake up and promptly disembowel Pinhead for his arrogance. If that wasn't enough, Lucifer became so mad that he decided to destroy hell itself, collapsing it under a stone sky, before an outside force erased hell completely alongside Pinhead, leading to his final death. And it would have never happened if he hadn't had such a thirst for power. How exquisitely miserable.
He also really hates being called Pinhead, to the point that, if anyone were to call him by that name, he'd ensure that their torture would be much worse than it would have been otherwise. It's this kind of ruthless attitude that makes him such a dangerous Cenobite in hell. Someone to be feared, respected, and even worshipped.
Let this be a lesson to never trifle with the Hell Priest, for if you make that grave mistake, there is only one thing left for you. Suffering that will be legendary, even in hell!
We'll tear your soul apart.
There was something strange about the old Morningside Cemetery. Townsfolk were dying at a rapid pace, but the coffins were never filled. And at the center of it all was the mortician himself, a strange, tall man with a squint in his eye.
The funeral is about to begin, sir.
Eventually, a young boy named Mike decided to investigate further into this, and learned that this tall man was no man at all. He was an interdimensional monster, taking corpses from the cemetery and turning them into his servants.
But it wasn't always like this. Back in the 1800s, he was simply Jebediah Morningside, a kind-hearted man who was a medic in the Union Army during the American Civil War. But being around so much death eventually sparked curiosity in Jebediah. What connection was there between our world and the world of the dead?
To find out, he created an interdimensional portal and prepared to learn the mysteries of life and death. He stepped through his portal and never came back.
Instead, what came back was the Tall Man. A sadistic monster hell-bent on taking over the world with his army of the dead. We'll never know what happened to Jebediah. Was his body possessed by someone else? Could his body have been replicated by an otherworldly creature? Or was the knowledge he gained so corrupting that Jebediah had a change of heart?
Do not expect the Phantasm series to give you any answers on stuff like this. What we do know is that this experience had changed Jebediah's biology entirely. Now he bleeds yellow, and is capable of regenerating lost fingers or hands. As a special bonus, these lost body parts will turn into screeching monsters that try to kill people.
The Tall Man can transform into anyone as a disguise, often donning the Lady in Lavender disguise to lure men out into the cemetery and kill them. After having sex with them, of course! Don't want to blow your cover too early, I guess! With a mere touch, the Tall Man can paralyze his enemies for a while, and his vision allows him to see through walls. He can also grow weird-ass creatures from his head, or he can make a creature in the form of a loved one to really mess with you.
And to create an army of the dead, you need to be able to bring the dead back to life, of course, which the Tall Man does to create more henchmen. He also has the Force, since he can move things with his mind. That explains why there's so many Jawas in these movies.
It's not the Force, but the Tall Man does possess several mental-based abilities. Like you said, he can move objects telekinetically. Whether he's busting down doors, raising tombstones from the ground, or messing with his opponent's weaponry, this ability has always proven useful for him. But he doesn't just have to use telekinesis to lift coffins for him. It turns out this mother is strong.
He's supernaturally strong enough to lift a whole coffin by himself, backhand you hard enough to knock you back, and can typically lift people with a single hand.
Okay. And goodbye.
It would also seem that his new biology lets him endure far more punishment than a normal human could. He's been hanged for hours and only experienced mild discomfort. He was stabbed in the back of the head, and was left totally unfazed after being shot with an RPG.
Circling back to his mental abilities, he can also heat up metal technology to the point that it becomes charred and useless. And, as strange as this will sound, he can sense your presence even if you're only observing him through an old photograph, or you're viewing him from a different dimension. In fact, if the Tall Man sees you looking at him from a different dimension, he can pull you right to him with his powers. Do you understand any of that? Because I don't.
You play a good game, boy. But the game is finished. Now you die.
Z's overwhelming powers made it incredibly difficult for Mike to fight back, or even understand fully what was going on. But, thanks to some help from his brother Jody and local ice cream man Reggie, they were able to trap the tall man under some rocks and save the day, finally putting this living nightmare to an end. Until he woke up.
When Mike woke up, he learned that everything he had just been through was just some sick dream he was having, and his brother Jody had actually died in a car wreck alongside his parents.
However, this was actually just another one of the Tall Man's tricks. With his mental abilities, the Tall Man can gain access to a victim's mind and create elaborate gaslighting dreams that make his victims, and audience, uncertain about what is and isn't really happening.
He can further mess with your mind by inducing strange illusions, or speaking to you through your mind. Furthermore, he can leave his foes in a trance to prevent them from shooting him when they have the chance.
So no, Jody had not actually been dead all along. The events that Mike went through really did happen. Or at least, most of it did. I mean, Reggie didn't die like what we saw.
You seem unsure about this.
I don't know! This series is notoriously hard to follow, even when you've seen it multiple times. The point is, most of the movie happened, except for Reggie dying, and the end of the movie is a fake out because Jody isn't actually dead. The Tall Man has him. Fuck, what happened next?
Well, Mike was just as confused as you are, Max. He wanted answers about his missing brother, and maybe some answers as to why he was developing strange psychic links with people. So he and Reggie set out to stop the Tall Man for good, and hopefully figure out what was really going on. This town was only the start of it, and the Tall Man was already on to the next one, ready to continue building his army.
The Tall Man's army is massive. You see those floating spheres? Those are actually the crushed down brains of his henchmen being encased in a metal shell. These spheres can fly around at incredible speeds, even keeping up with speeding cars just fine. And when they reach you, well, content warning again.
Well, at least the Tall Man likes to get creative. These spheres will sometimes come with circular buzzsaws to cut off your ear, or they can summon spikes around themselves to stab some poor folks. They can even self-destruct and blow up your head. Also, they have this little eye that can come out for spying on you. This is certainly a unique weapon to carry around in such a huge supply.
We do mean huge supply. There are literally thousands of them, and the Tall Man can travel to any of his spheres at a moment's notice. Though, a few shots from a shotgun can ultimately take one out.
So thank goodness for the Golden Sentinel Sphere. The Tall Man actually keeps one of these in his head, so I'm guessing that's his brain in there. The Gold Sphere is way stronger, able to send people flying, smash through doors, and even bust a perfect hole in someone's head. These spheres can shoot lasers hot enough to burn holes in more doors. They have scanners to sense nearby life, and just like the other Sentinels, they have drills and blades to mess you up with.
But wait, there's more! How about a giant Sentinel? These huge things can fire lasers capable of tearing down skyscrapers, and are fast enough to keep up with helicopters. He really upped his game with these ones.
But the Tall Man doesn't just turn his henchmen into balls of steel. Most of them become lurkers, those little Jawa-looking guys. They're the result of the Tall Man literally crushing people down, and as such, they're actually very heavy. They also like to eat faces, so don't let them near you.
He also has zombies, which are the minions he doesn't crush. They each have a sentinel in their brain and can endure tough punishment. Headshots don't kill these zombies. They can be run over, blown up, blasted with shotguns, and drilled into, but they'll keep kicking.
The Tall Man's army only grows with every town he visits, and as it turned out, Michael's brother Jody had been made into a member of it. At first it seemed like he wanted to help Mike, but he was working for the Tall Man at that point. And as it turned out, the Tall Man wanted Mike to join the army too.
So it turns out that Michael had been developing abilities similar to the Tall Man, even having his own gold sphere in his head, and the Tall Man was only trying to help him hone his powers, presumably to make Michael his right-hand man, or something. I don't know, this is so confusing. But Michael fought him every step of the way, and made one final attempt to kill the Tall Man. But he failed.
No matter how many times the Tall Man was killed, he would come back good as new, and the key to it all were his dimensional forks. Jebediah's original creation allowed him to travel to different dimensions, or even inside someone's dreams. He even seems to gain more power in your dreams, able to make large platforms and even become intangible. These dimensional gates can be opened anywhere. and the tall man can create as many as he'd like.
Sometimes the portals can even lead directly to this red planet, where the gravity is intense. Ultimately, these gateways are what allow the tall man to live forever. There are tens of thousands of him, in dimensions that cannot be perceived by the human mind. When one tall man dies, another just takes his place seconds later.
With immortality like this, you have to wonder, what does the tall man do in his downtime? He must get pretty bored.
Apparently, he reads plenty of Fangoria when he's not working. He knows all about Freddy Krueger, Jason Voorhees, and... Oh, is that Pinhead?
The tall man has done his research. He's ready for this exact matchup. Anyways, because of the unkillable nature of the tall man, Mike's plan failed. And when the tall man realized that Mike was never going to join him, he just ripped the sphere from Michael's head and left him for dead.
Without any forces to oppose him, well, the tall man took over the world. It was made much easier after the tall man created a virus that spread around the world and caused people's heads to blow up. Now that the tall man's army was at its peak, the world had no answer for him.
But it turned out, Mike was still alive, somehow, and after getting Reggie back on board, they made one final swing at the tall man. Thankfully, their adventures with the tall man had eventually begun to expose some of his weaknesses.
The tall man has a specific weakness to the cold. He lives on a scorching hot red planet, so any kind of cold will get him messed up. It only takes a few seconds in a freezer to completely freeze him. Also, should anyone hit a tuning fork, the tall man will involuntarily freeze in place for a short amount of time.
These are certainly weaknesses that Mike and Reggie have exploited in the past, but then again, just look where that got them. In the end, there was no way to stop the tall man from just returning from the forks to do his business. Mike and Reggie were able to survive their final duel with the tall man, but they had to leave knowing that there was no real way to save the world.
And that is honest to God how this all ends. Our heroes leave to find shelter someplace cold, and the tall man rules the world, with nobody to challenge him.
I guess when put against these odds, who could really blame them? This is just how the world ends. Or, this could have all been one long dream that an aging ice cream man is having. We've been spending all this time trying to explain the story of Phantasm, but it's so vague that this could honestly be the truth.
It would be a fool's errand to meddle in the affairs of the Lord of the Dead. So keep to yourself the next time you hear strange noises in the cemetery, lest you face the eternal wrath of the tall man. We have such sights to show you, loyal viewers.
If this episode doesn't scare you, you're already dead.
Put that down.
The box. You opened it. I came.
That one is mine, Cenobite.
Are you so arrogant to believe that you can interfere with Leviathan's will?
If you want him, get through me first.
Fight!
Such sweet suffering. These toys will not be your salvation. You will know pain.
Poor Elliot, you lost your mind.
Enough tricks.
Not good enough, I'm afraid.
Is that good enough, old man? I will enjoy making you suffer, and I will enjoy making you enjoy it.
You play a good game, Cenobite, but the game is finished. Now you die.
It is over.
No, it's not.
Take your time.
You're an unwanted pawn in my game, Cenobite. But perhaps I'll find use for you yet.
Do you think Pinhead had an erection at the end of that fight?
Why would you ask me that?
It seems in character for him.
Shut up, no. Maybe. Okay, he probably did. He's dead now, though. His erection can't hurt anybody.
Right you are, Max. But this was no easy battle to figure out. When you look at their physical feats, they actually weren't too far apart from each other. Both can scale to forces powerful enough to bust through doors, but Pinhead's strength was ultimately more impressive. On the other hand, the tall man had the better durability feat of surviving an RPG shot, while Pinhead was only near a gas tank explosion. But on the other hand, Pinhead was faster since he could catch 3 bullets in his mouth.
These weren't his only advantages either. Pinhead did in fact have more powers overall that could help him overcome the tall man, whether it be turning him into a painting, sucking his blood out, or even abusing the tall man's weakness to the cold by creating an extremely cold room for him. But none of this is actually enough to net Pinhead the win here.
The tall man has over 10,000 different versions of himself in dimensions that humans can't possibly imagine. So Pinhead had no real hope of actually killing him for good, seeing how even if he kills the tall man, another version of him will just immediately walk out of his dimensional forks and continue the job. While we don't doubt that Pinhead is willing to wage this war for an eternity, or however long it takes to kill over 10,000 tall men, all it takes is a single tall man to disembowel him, give him a virus that will blow his head up, or use telekinesis to rip his pins out and leave him powerless.
While Pinhead is faster, it isn't by some insane degree that the tall man can't fight back against. He'd still likely be able to pull off these methods of murdering Pinhead, and with the thousands of sentinels to distract him, it'll be all the easier. The tall man can also put his victims into a temporary paralysis, which would leave Pinhead vulnerable.
Furthermore, with his mental tricks, the tall man could give Pinhead hallucinations and make him lose track of what's real and what isn't. He could even go as far as to make Pinhead believe he was Elliot Spencer again, and that everything involving Cenobites was some sick dream.
The tall man's ability to invade one's mind and toy with their memories makes it very likely that he'll be able to exploit Pinhead's weakness to Elliot Spencer. If he were to be reminded of that past life, he'd be spiritually weakened enough to be easily defeated by the tall man.
It's also worth noting that the tall man's sentinels were more useful than the chains in the long run. He has literally thousands of them, all capable of drilling through people, surrounding themselves in spikes, and just blowing up to kill someone.
And that's just the normal spheres. The golden ones are even stronger. Then there's the giant sentinels, which are more than strong enough to completely obliterate Pinhead. With the overwhelming numbers on his side, the more destructive power, and the ability to come back from anything Pinhead throws at him, the tall man's victory is all but ensured.
Making this multiverse match's winner, the tall man.
see.